expected to look for 10 to 12 new places to start excavation for geothermal. And 2 of those places are on Oahu. So it only made sense to look to experts from the Big Island who have been going through this for many years to come and talk about what they've experienced and what they know and what they've learned that can help us. So we have 2 speakers, Holly Deadman, who has said that Terry is going to introduce him when she is done. He said, instead of giving me his information, so you can take me to yours. But we're going to start with Terry. Terry Nakahe, not pale, was born on Moku, raised in Kūkākūkā, Hawaiian homelands, and now resides in Paliana. She graduated from Hilo High School, UH and Hilo. She has a BBA from the College of Business and Economics and AS in Carpentry from HCC, which I think is very, so diverse. She currently works for the County of Iulai Planning Department as a city planner. She is the founder of Kūkākūkā, Waiakea, Ahupua, Crown Land Heirs, and Truth for the People. Also a member of Pele Defense Fund. She is also an entrepreneur, the owner of Papamu, Native Hawaiian LLC, Hawaiian Authentic Products. So let me introduce Terry now.
Aloha. Aloha. Mahalo nui for being here. Terry Napiahi. I am a member of Pele Defense Fund. Palikapu Deadman is a mentor. I've learned under his wings for many years, and I am very honored. What you learn from our Renaissance and our leaders like Palikapu does not come from the university. It is actually engaging in some of the issues that he said he chooses to fight. And I remember the first time Pali, we got together, we revitalized Pele Defense Fund in 2011, 10 and 11. Although Pele Defense Fund was actually organized the beginning of, in the early 80s, in the beginning of geothermal, when they were doing their initiatives early. But the first thing that he did, and I have to share this, you gotta understand how much knowledge Palikapu Deadman has in the trenches. And I'm going to give him this honor because that is how I was able to feel confident in what I do in the system. He chooses to do, I remember him saying this, he chooses to fight issues that has a tourniquet situation to stop the bleeding that is happening currently within the system that is causing the bleeding. And that was something very interesting to me as to why he chooses to fight issues that are currently impacting our families, especially our Hawaiians. And that was one of the things that intrigued me the most. And then while learning, I said, "Can you teach me, Pali?" He said, "You sure?" And I said, "Yes, I want to learn. I want to learn how to do this. I want to be able to learn and understand how to address the issues and how." And he says, "Because it's very lonely in the trenches." He says, you want to be lonely, you follow me. And I learned what it was like to do it in the trenches with Pali for a decade. And I'm very, very honored for to have been able to really actually learn beside Palikapu Deadman and the issues that he feels that are impacting our Kanaka. And I remember the first thing, I have no idea how to go and give a testimony. And then I realized that they give testimonies, 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes to tell your everything. And I remember the first time he said, I go, "Pali, I'm gonna go to Oahu, I'm gonna testify." And he said, "Okay." So I flew over, testified in behalf of our iwi kupuna, 2 minutes, and then I went home and I said, I did it. And he goes, is there a video? And I said, yes. He goes, let me see. So I showed him the video. He looked at it and he said, too much emotion. You got it. After a decade to be able to say the things that I do. The first time I met Polly, I said, can you teach me? He came to me with a piece of paper and a folder. And in that folder was 3 items. He says, this is what we're gonna do. I mean, not 3, 13 items typed out. And it was what he was going to teach me to do, and specifically in 13 bullet points. And in the 13 bullet points, one of them was to go to the legislation and to be able to change bills, kill bills, meet legislators that did not speak for our people. And he went down the list, 13. And that's how that was my ha'awina ho'i. That was something that he actually did. And I have that pamphlet today. I have that folder today. And the first 2 things he said was to memorize these 2 laws. And one of them was Article 12, Section 7, and NAGPRA. Those are the 2 laws that he told me to memorize. And that was my first lesson with Kūkākūkā Deadman, actually learning the steps if you want to. He chooses to fight within the system where many people choose not to because they do not, and I understand it, I respect you, who chooses to not participate in the laws of the government that overthrew ours in our kingdom. And I understand and I respect you for that. However, Pali has taught me to deal with issues that require to stop the bleeding. And I understood what that meant, and I chose to do my initiatives that way as well. So, geothermal, I'm gonna go right into that. I lived right next to HGPA in Puna. I live less than a quarter mile away from it. My in-laws live closer to HGPA. And I remember when I first met my in-laws, they were talking about how that plant down the street was killing them. And I remember them talking about it so many times, how angry my father-in-law was because of the smell that was being pushed up, because they lived up on the hill, HDPA was down here. And at that time, the emissions were emitted into the air, and the toxic ponds were in, the brine was put into a huge toxic ponds. I have photos over here so that you can see what they did prior in the 80s. And one day, that geothermal plant, HGPA, that was being pushed by the state, blew up. It blew, and it sounded like a 747. You couldn't even talk, that was so loud. And it blew up, and it was like a huge blow and a push of pressure. And they did not stop it, and it was spewing very toxic emissions and gases that they called hydrogen sulfide. And we had to be relocated. We had to leave our homes until they were able to cap that geothermal plant. Well, today that geothermal plant was shut down. And thank goodness to the people of Puna and Kūkākūkā Deadman that they had plans to do 20 geothermal plants on the rift of Puna, just like that one. At the same time, Kūkākūkā Deadman, and he can tell you the stories later, but I'm giving you the gist, a little history, and then the current issues of geothermal. At that time, they were pushing 20 geothermal plants, 25 megawatts to equal the amount of 500 megawatts to put through a cable so it could come to Oahu. So those plants started, I think, in Volcano, then it went to Kaha'olea, and Campbell Estates decided to give their land to be able to do a geothermal plant, and Polly was in court with them at that time. And I remember him telling me that he was at the hotel with his lawyers at Hilo Hawaiian. Well, True Geothermal, well, Campbell Estates was with their lawyers in the other room as they were discussing court case. Then it blew up, Pu'uo'o vent. And if I'm not mistaken, Polly, am I correct? Yeah. That the drill pad was on Pu'uo'o that created Pu'uo'o flow, and it hasn't stopped since 1983. So we believe that drilling close enough to Pele, you're gonna open it up. You're gonna open it up for her to be there. And so can you imagine what would happen with the 20? So that is basically what happened. We have photos of what they used to do with geothermal. It was emitted into the air and put in toxic ponds. So now, because of the Puna people and Pele Defense Fund, they re-inject everything into the ground. So if you can see the toxic ponds, whatever they use as chemicals to loosen up the pohaku, it comes back up. They have to put it somewhere. Well, all of that goes right back into the aina. And so today, now I'm gonna flip to today. I'm going to leave the cultural perspective to Palikapu Deadman because that's what he's been talking about for years. So today, in 2000, so here we are, the ones that killed the geothermal plants in the 80s were the Hawaiians. Here we come again, 2009 and 10, where we have the Hawaiians now proposing geothermal. Only this time it was a native to native model so that we can see the perspective of it being self-determination and a money-making machine for our people. So here we have the state has all the historical information that they can pull up in testimony of the impacts of geothermal that they forgot because they're regurgitating it again in 2010. Only this time it was a push with a New Zealand company that's doing a native to native model. So is it okay now? At first it was desecration, right, to our tutu, but now it's because a Hawaiian owns the company that it's a gift. So that's what was being proposed in 2010, 11, 12. We were banging them, I'm not gonna say the names, banging them at council, in legislation, trying to stop them all over again. And we were able to do that in 2013, 14, and 15. Then, 2014 comes around. The University of Hawaii comes with a great idea of doing geothermal again. But you have to know that the university has been pushing this from the get-go. There's two professors that you need to know and hear their names. One is Donald Thomas, who did the first subsurface thermal testing for the sites statewide for exploratory drilling. Protege Nicole Lautzi from the University of Hawaii, Hawaii Geothermal Groundwater and Geothermal Resource Center of the University of Hawaii, the protege of Donald Thomas. In 2014, they proposed to drill water at Pohakuloa. Two sites at Pohakuloa, one at the State Park of Mauna Kea and Waikiki of the Mauna. This was done for drilling groundwater in 2014. At the same time, they were proposing to do 22 geothermal exploratory holes on Iulai. So we decided to take Puna to Kona to tell them of the impacts of geothermal so that they can learn about it and what they had to deal with in 2014. We went there for every week for a whole month to educate the people of Kona, the people of Puna to Kona. We were able to get 9 plaintiffs to file a lawsuit so that they would have to do an environmental impact statement or an environmental review because they were going to do exploratory drilling without one. So what we did was we filed a lawsuit saying you have to do an EIS before you drill. So we had standing. We had to fly over to the Board of Land and Natural Resources because they were filing for a permit for those 22 holes on Iulai. The same time that they were going to do TMT at the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Everybody was outside chanting. And it was our hearing. We went in there, I testified, raised my hand, I said I contest this case, flew back, had a lawyer with Petty Defense Fund to help us file this suit. We were the first, Petty Defense Fund was the first case in the environmental courts before you had to go criminal courts, I think, for all of these, allegations that they call. But we were the first case in the courts, environmental courts. The university pulled out and they didn't follow through with their drilling the 22 holes at Iulai. But at the same time we were there, they were up on Kūkākūkā drilling for water. That's how they came up with the probability maps that they're presenting now to legislators. All the different sites on each Moku where they believe there's geothermal. Because they drilled water, different permit now. They drilled water, they got some heated water, so maybe, you can just pull it down. You can put it on the ground, it's good. Maybe, because there's hot water, there's geothermal. Okay? So that's how they came up with the probability maps. Now we have DHHL, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, giving their lands and offering it for geothermal companies to use. But in order for them to do that, they need to drill for geothermal. So here we have the probability maps, 14 sites, one up Kauai High, one up Mauna Kea, and one in Ka'u on our Moku. This year legislation, they produced 16 bills. 8 of those bills was to eliminate or get rid of the environmental review. Thank goodness, none of them went through. But last year, they were able to give the Department of DBED, gave it through the university a line item, $2.7 million to Vika Consulting so that they could go around our Moku to tell everybody that the native to native model is going to work for our Hawaiians, and that's okay if it's desecration. You're gonna go anywhere. We'll tell you that this is what we're gonna do. $2.7 million of public monies, your tax-paying dollars. This year, they didn't even go there. They got slammed. I'm sorry. They came to our Moku and we slammed them good. They're gonna come again, we're gonna do the same thing. I'm sorry. So this is where we're at now. At legislation, we killed all those bills, we testified against it, and they gave their money again to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands now. So when their bills were killed, they revitalized one bill that was HB 1307. And that bill was regurgitated or resurrected so that they could shove and have DHHL now produce the initiatives for geothermal. That is the current issues. And if you want anything to know about DHHL, what they're doing, ask me, because I was born and raised on DHHL. One of the oldest Hawaiian homes developed, 100 years, we celebrated. 7 major toxic facilities, sewage plant in the front street of my home The airport, a few steps away from my home. My family lives right in front of Touch and Go. All the gas storage companies, Helco, landfill, the airport, all lives, all set in and around our Hawaiian people my whole life. I'm still fighting our government so that they can take ownership of what they did to my people. And I'm going to stop there and give Palikapu his time.
You know, at the beginning of all of this, it was the idea that we didn't have a traditional practice. We're not supposed to believe in our traditions. So we was the first case on our religious rights to the Hawaii Supreme Court. And all the judges in Hawaiian Supreme Court were Christians. So they judged against our traditions and said geothermal is okay. No study, no impact on what would happen to a race of people when you alter the theology of the beliefs. So they were doing studies on birds, bees, bugs in the EIS, but not on spirituality. And that's where we were pushing. You know, I started out with rockets on Hawaiian homelands in Kūkākūkā. They're going to take rockets and put it on the HHL lands, and there was no awards. So that's where I started my whole activist thing in Kūkākūkā. We did roadblocks, we occupied the land, and in time, we prevailed. We won. We got the rockets out, and now we got Hawaiians living on the land. So, the geothermal people who was in Volcano didn't want geothermal next to their neighborhood. And they were going through a contested case hearing on geothermal. And that neighborhood was doctors, artists, people in charge of Audubon Society, all environmental people. So in the courts, in their courts, their lawyers wasn't good enough to the state's lawyers. Because the state said they would spend more money, have better experts, and would outspeak the Volcano Community Association. So I'm fishing at the beach, and they come down looking for me because I was doing this activist work in Kūkākūkā. And they told me that they want me to be involved in that geothermal contested case because a native perspective was not being addressed. It was just science to science, and you just pay for a better one. And that's what was going on. So they asked me, and I had to say, you know, Billy gonna take care of it. I don't need to bother with that. But then I couldn't sleep at night. So I came back and told him, yeah, I'll be involved. We gotta get on record, whatever it is, and let the future know what we do and what we did. During that time, they had the map up on the wall of where the geothermal plant was going. Then you hear, the following week, fishermen out in the ocean saw a fire come out in the middle of the forest because they could see it from the ocean inland. And nobody on land could see it. And then they called in the rangers, the national parks, and that was the first beginning of Pu'uo. Pu'uo erupted, wiped out all their plans. So they were stuck, all this investment. Volcano was happy that she blew up and covered everything that they were going to do. So what did the state do is that they did a land swap. This volcano where it erupted was in Campbell Estate property. They're like what, Big 6, Big 7 in the state of Hawaii? So anyway, the state swapped the land. They took the public land, gave it to this private guy. We own the volcano and they own the forest. So they could continue drilling those plants he's talking about. 25 megawatts of plants. They put up an EIS saying it was $1 billion that the state would spend of your tax money to put up for this geothermal development. We took their study, and our attorneys knew other people that do economic feasibility studies. So we took the UH study to them, and they were $2 billion short. So this whole project would have cost $3 billion of your taxpayers' money. And Danny Norrie was up there in Washington being the sponsor of this development, hustling bonds for $3 billion to pay for this development. Well, as we're in court, as I said earlier, we had to fight for that, lost Supreme Court on religious grounds, but we wanted gathering rights on the land swap. They swapped the land, but they never swapped my rights. So now Campbell is in court with us on our use of these lands. So now we're in court. There was years, but they ruled in our favor. Now that law that we fought on gathering rights is being taught at Richard's School of Law. It is a supreme case on Native Hawaiian gathering rights. So if you go there, you'll see it. They teach it now, our case on that. But geothermal didn't stop. Like you say, the small geothermal plant that the state started with, besides pushing these 500 megawatts, they had a little one going on with 7 megawatts. That's when it was sold to Ormac. Israelis came in and bought that up. They still own it today. So I'm saying that it's rape money. You rape my belief, and you take that money, ship it back to Israel to buy bullets to kill Palestinians. I was raising that issue, okay? Because that's what they were doing, raping my religion, and no study on what that would be. But I was steady in their face, because you gotta realize that they took all our spirituality away. And that spirituality was the connection to the Aina. So when they take away your beliefs of how you believe and raised, then that's what happened. Now we don't own nothing. We're not connected to the ocean, we're not connected to the beach, we're not connected to the water, the forest, and now the latest was Malakir. So you can see how spirituality is the key. You cannot fight them in the Western world, man. You gotta fight them in your world. And your world got a lot of proof. And as I said, there's no extra Kanaka. There's no extra way to live like one. You are one. And you got nothing to lose to stand up to it. You will never be a threat to the United States or anybody by being a real Kanaka. So that's the point about how we got to get back and how everybody got to understand that is a right. I'm a veteran during the Vietnam era. I went and fought for everybody's church and came back and they tell me you don't get yours. Want to tell me before I go, I wouldn't have joined your army. Of course, that was how it was in high school. Mandatory ROTC. You don't get ROTC, public school, not private, you don't graduate. So they condition us to become soldiers to go to Vietnam. I'm grumbling about coming back and not being treated fair, about everybody's church that I fought for, and I don't get none for mine. So you got all these little things that builds up to why you don't like it. You just can't come out and say it. You got all this stuff that proves you're right. So that's where it's been, and that's where it's gonna go. And now, like you said, there are a lot of people making an approach to geothermal because they got a free resource to make money. That's it. They took everything in the Aina. Now they're going to take your soul, abuse it, and make money on it. And that's the problem with this. So geothermal, now they come back after all these years and all the laws we fought, which was good and bad. Like I say, the Supreme Court, the only case brought to them on religious rights, we lost. And it's simple. All these judges are conditioned Christian. Now what? You're going to make a square in a round hole? So we lost. They said, no, you Hawaiians don't have that right. And you know damn well we do. It's just a mentality of being told and being guided by non-Hawaiians. And that hasn't stopped. And now we got the whole idea in our history of migrants and their babies that run our government now, that tell us how we should live today. And they are no part of who I am. But we got nothing and no direction until we get up and speak. So I really blame all the guys I went to school with, all the migrant babies that know who I am, that in legislation not making a correction to the wrongdoing, but to compound the problem. That's what they're doing. And they know it's an idea of what? No more extra Hawaiians, they'll fade away. All of them get continents where they all came from. There's millions of them that replace themselves. I'm not going to be replaced by a Tahitian or a Samoan. I'm a Hawaiian. We're different. And you cannot say we'll shove a bunch of Polynesians because they got brown skin to take over the Hawaiians' place. That's our call. And you know it's a big poaku to roll uphill. But you only get one chance to push this poaku. And you got to do it. You cannot let the poaku roll you over. And we know how hard and how tough our history was. Watching the reenactment is that showing me how pilau it started and how bad our alii, who was in charge, allow it to happen. That's how I look at it. The worst part of our history was monarchy. You look, I was a Kanaka, the oldest bone found in Ka'u, 450 AD. When did this all happen? 1700? And that happens to what? Take me away from the Aina? Get rid of the traditional people? Is that what our so-called elites was doing? Or kings and queens? Why do we accept kings and queens, which is European, not Hawaiian? And we fly the British flag. What is that all about? I go to conferences with American Indians, and they cannot believe that we played the monarchy card. I can't say nothing to them about kings and queens, because they didn't do that. They're still traditional Indians. They still do the spirituality practices. And their history, they rebelled against their treatment. They'll never ever join that part. And we were so gullible that we became part of that part. And I'm just saying, if you're going to teach the kids the future, tell them the truth and don't live on the bad things of our history. And that's what I'm saying, that geothermal ties into that because it challenges to me today the real thing that's left. And that's the belief of Pele. I see Pele every week now, or twice a week, twice a month. She surfaces. I have never seen Jesus yet. Okay? He came a long way, but he ain't fixing nothing. Okay? I'm a vet. They come and blast killing machines, the Christians. Bless this boat. Bless that missile. Bless that rocket. Pele don't bless that stuff. What's wrong with me staying with who I am, my true self? And that's the argument. We got to detox from the whole Christianity idea. You got to start changing. You got to start acting properly as a Hawaiian. This is the only place you can do it. You're not going to make a difference in Pasadena, Las Vegas. You got to make the difference here. And that's what we do. That's how I feel we should do. And like I said, we will never be a threat to nobody if we stay Hawaiian. And I ain't encourage people that come here and make this their home to embrace the Hawaiian. That's your only chance. I heard the Admiral on news. You guys saw the Admiral with this rim pack. And the Admiral said, if there's endangered species in the ocean, in the water, we won't practice there. If there's burials, historical sites on the Aina, we won't practice there. And I'm saying, how many environmental groups get? They love the ocean, love the sand, love the beach, love the waves, love surfing. And then how many love bugs, love flowers? Why aren't you all getting together, embrace the Hawaiian, and save this place? When we was dealing with RIMPAC, we sent the uncles to Japan, to Canada, and talked to the consulates there about coming to Hawaii and dealing with RIMPAC. And we told them the desecration when you come. So when they came that year, they didn't use bombs. They assimilated the bombs. They computerized it so they wouldn't damage the Aina. At least we could say that we went there to tell them early, and this was the results. That time faded away. No follow-up. And PKO was like, soon they pow bomb, they all went home. As I said, the bombing is a lifetime. It's got different ways of desecration. Bombing, bulldozers, taking away my rights, taking my land from water. These little things is what compounds itself that we don't get to say much. And that's what I'm saying. If those things were things that worried the Navy today on RIMPAC, then that's where you should go to get more support to environmental organizations that claim they love this place. Okay? Why aren't they hugging me instead of trees? That's what they're supposed to do. I came with this environment. I am part of the environment. We're related to the environment. Our chants and prayers that we pass down includes the environment. It doesn't talk about this foreign entity coming here to change my spirituality. It doesn't say that. And now what? They don't believe in our traditions, so they even dig us up by the hundreds and put a hotel there. A known burial site, hundreds they dig up. Maui was 1,200 when we protested. And that was the okay from the governor, and Waihe, the okay from Oha, which is part of the state, and the governors of those islands all gave the permission to go dig up these Kanakas. And today, there is no law that allows your protection. And I'm saying that that's the problem. I didn't know where to turn. Then realize that if you're holding a sign today, you're too late. That's what it is. You gotta go where this sign was allowed to happen. And that's legislation. And the fastest way to get law is not going to legislation and beg all these migrant babies that sit on committees to help you. The shortest way is through courts. That's all we get. And that's the idea of one man, the judge, not a legislative committee that's going to help you make law. So you gotta do lawsuits. You have to put your Kanakaism in the lawsuits and express yourself, because you're really the winner. They gotta lie. They gotta lie. And they gotta be real racist to ignore your claims. And that's it, man. America's MO is racism. You're never going to get rid of that. You cannot get rid of those people.
That's right.
American Indians know that. They don't participate. They just get their abuse and try to deal with it. But they won't give in to this whole government that's desecrated them historically, just like us. We got data to show all that. We got stats to show all that. We're the fastest dying race in this state. Hawaiians, fastest dying. And we're number 5 on the census. What's that say? get more other nationalities than us, but we die first. 60% of Hawaiians is in prison today. So all of a sudden, my misery becomes a commodity. We can make money on the misery of Hawaiians. So don't really help them get better. Keep them in that box so we can make a living. And you can see that they had all the leeway, and we're in the worst situation today. Why don't we have health problems taken care of? Why can't I carry a card in my wallet? They go to any doctor, any hospital, and they prioritize taking care of me. What's wrong with that? As I say, we're not a threat to nobody, but that's a responsibility should have come with you by telling me, you run my life down. And all the migrant babies, you run my life too. Why aren't you looking at the betterment of Hawaiians? So you can see the religious part of what happened to Hawaiians when the missionaries came. You know, the American Indians fought against missionary schools. They came and steal their babies and forced them to go to schools. In Hawaii, the missionary schools, the Hawaiians line up. That's Kamehameha schools. That's St. Louis. All these Christian schools, they line up to condition the Hawaiian to get farther away from the spirituality and start acting more like New York City. And if you don't see the results of the beginning of that school today, then you're not paying attention. That's the situation. It's logical, it's historical, and if we lead as number one in the social problems of living here as Hawaiians, that's a big problem. We'll never fix it if nobody cares about who we are. And we are being run, like I said, by visitors, migrants, and they came and left their homelands. Why? They weren't proud to stay there. They didn't care about their culture. They didn't care about their ancestors, their burials. They dig out. They come to Hawaii with that attitude. So now it's the idea of how far over the headstones do you look? Do we come to the cemetery, there's grandma and there's grandpa. That's it? What about grandma's grandma, grandma? Grandpa's grandpa's grandpa. Why aren't you caring about that? You in Hawaii, using our culture, practicing our culture, selling our culture, and you're not going to take care of who taught you that. Your grandmother may have taught you something in Hawaii, but it came from the other grandmother and the other grandmother. And that's who they're digging us up. They're digging those people up. And it's not about how an archaeologist tells you how to treat it. That's not a native occupation. Archaeologist is not Hawaiian. That's a form of development. Then they make these little laws. You gotta have a burial treatment plan. You gotta have a burial monitor. You don't monitor rape. You don't monitor that. And the burial treatment plan was how they were put in already. They don't need a second plan. They don't need a second opinion. And that's where we're at today. The simple little things that we are. They just pick your way till you really cannot stand up anymore. They knock all your upbringings that you're supposed to carry on, your traditions. They ask you, hey, what genealogy are you? I understand genealogy. That's to recognize a family. But when they tell me, you're from the Big Island, you cannot go Maui, and you cannot protect the bones on Maui, because you're from the Big Island. Do you have genealogy? I tell them, no. Then you cannot come here, Maui County. I say, I got DNA, but I don't need genealogy. Swap the bones, swap me. What's the difference? And you want alphabet? So you can raise these issues of common sense to make differences. And I think that's what should happen. Well, maybe you got to leave time for questions and answers.
environmental court was not in place. It was new. So we have criminal court, we have family court, we have all of these different courts that judge, depending on the issue. So an environmental court was never available. But in 2014, they added a new court. So now anything that you discuss that is connected to environmental issues, it gets, and if you file a court case, it gets heard by a judge in the environmental courts now. So if it's anything to do with, if we can, yeah.
The environmental courts was in Vermont, and Hawaii adopted that. So I asked them during that time, the board, where do we fit as a Hawaiian in the environmental court? They said everywhere. Don't go to the criminal courts where we always been going. Go to the environmental court. So the judge got to change his hat and look what part of the environment are we hurting you with. So I'm saying to everybody, you want to fight a Hawaiian issue, go to the environmental courts. And I'm saying that that was a ruling by Judge Ibarra when the university tried to do geothermal drilling. He ruled as an environmental court judge that the university has to submit the full study from the beginning to the end of geothermal. They could not piecemeal the process. So the judge stopped that whole thing and UH went away. But environmental courts is a new thing.
So are you saying that you automatically have standing?
Yes,
Not like
standing in environmental court.
So after the Board of Land and Natural Resources heard, so all the permits that come for drilling groundwater and also for geothermal, there's two different permits that they have to file for. It is done through the Board of Land and Natural Resources. So that gets heard on their agenda, and you have to go there to go and testify. If you want to contest the case, you have to be present to contest that particular case or permit that they're applying for. So like he's mentioned, we had standing. We had standing when we contested that the University of Hawaii in this case of Iulai, the 22 holes. We had cased it because we are part of the environmental review. There's only one group of people that is being discussed in any kind of development for the environment, because we are the environment. We are the only group of people that they see if we are being impacted. So we had standing when we fought them in this case. And we will have standing every time they apply for a permit anywhere on this Kaupai Island. Anywhere. So he filed a lawsuit for Pele Defense Fund versus Patty, and it was Capital Estates that he did in the early 90s, I believe. And he won this. Judge Amano, the same judge that was used for TMT, that they grabbed her for a reason. She was the only judge that heard a case about gathering rights that Pali had pushed for while they were doing in Volcano Puna. And that case, when he filed, was heard, and there was facts and findings and a conclusion in his court case, Pele Defense Fund versus Patty. And so that gave any Hawaiian that is practicing his traditional customary rights. So,
and you know that during that case, the settlement of the case, when everybody settled, was that Pele Defense Fund became part owners of the forest. So whatever they're going to develop, the state or in homes, whoever, we have to be consulted. That's how that ruling came out at the end. So you can see that you got so much if you test it, if you do it. that is in your favor. And precedent has been set already. Use it. The Hawaiians got arrested hunting on Kauai. 7. And they used our case and got off gathering rights. So you can make a difference. If you're going to wait for sovereignty to come around, you got to do this stuff first. What's in the interim? What are you doing between your sovereignty and the kingdom? You got to keep yourself alive and using it so the kingdom be worth something. And not a bunch of sick people or sick natives, because that's the status we're in. You got to get out of that. And it's so practical and so real that you cannot be afraid. This is your house. They're going to abuse you. Do it in my house. But you got to do it after my point of view. And that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to encourage Kanakas to stand up for themselves. I know it's an okey-doke world. Everybody's happy. We're all working. We get union. We go to school and all of that. That's automatic. But then you got to realize what part of that is me. That's general public stuff. Am I different than general public? You damn are different. You should know that. But you have to express yourself on how the difference is. And that's the attitude we have to have. As I told, she was saying earlier, being an activist, you're going to be a lonely Kanaka. You will not have friends, and your friends will be scared about the truth. And all you're doing is dealing with the truth. So, as I say, you got to detox, clean yourself out, and just be real. Just be yourself, and you're not harming nobody. And they have to yield to that. They have to yield. And if there's precedent, move it up a notch. Move it up a notch. And just don't rest on those Hawaiian fights and those Hawaiian conclusions, but move it up so it betters more Hawaiians and encourage them that this is the way to go. This is the way to go. Challenge the system. Challenge that, because it ain't your system. It's an abusive system, and you should know that. If we are the fastest dying from hereditary diseases and don't carry a card in our pocket to get fixed no matter where you go to medicine, then that's another problem. We should be able to be taken care of by the so-called fake OHA state agency that is. Someday, OHA might have all Kapani trustees, because anybody can be a trustee and everybody can vote. Just think about what our future is going to be as we fade away. And if you ain't part of the Uncle Tom Society, then you won't get promoted. You won't be able to do this. Won't be able to do that. You know, it's a tough thing, but, you know, you only want Hawaiian one time, everybody. You don't want a second chance.
I don't have a question. I have a statement. We have a kanawai in Hawaii. It says whoever owns our people that are up to anything, we can kill. I am trying to enact all the deputy sheriffs in Hawaii and volunteers become that. We can arrest Hawaii, Honolulu Police Department, the Honolulu Police Department, because we are taking part of the government. If somebody's howling one time, I always go out and kill them.
Yeah.
Nothing personal. It's the law.
You know, when they do the overthrow that we watch, none of that law you talk about exists today. They didn't care about the kingdom law, never cared about Kanaka law. This is the new law. See, this is the new law. So we gotta be smart enough to say, I don't can use that anymore. They don't recognize it, that Kanaka law. I gotta deal with what I live with today. So what do? You gotta create your own, bro. We gotta create your own mind with this whole new people in legislation and judges and people that make difference to you. You can say all the old stuff, which is all right, but they don't care. I mean, if they did care, we wouldn't have this big struggle. They would have cared about how we set it up, but they threw it out the window. So now you as an intelligent Hawaiian gotta make the difference by being more creative and more understanding in the fight. That's just the way it is.
Thank you so much for coming all the way from the Big Island.
Sure.
There were a lot of things, so thank you so much. Following this up with another subject, impact and Palestine. Yay. So I invite up Ann Wright. This is retired Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Ann Wright. Yes. Yes. Let me get you some water and all right, I'm gonna let you hold it.
Well, I feel a little inadequate following that beautiful presentation, and my apologies for my ancestors who took over this wonderful place with the 1832 and 1834, 1894. So apologies for many of us who are now part of the settler group. I've lived here now for 23 years. I used to be in the U.S. government. I was 29 years in the U.S. Army, retired as a colonel, and then I was a U.S. diplomat too for 16 years. But in 2003, I ended up resigning in opposition to the U.S. war on Iraq. And I had lived briefly here in Honolulu working on a special assignment with the U.S. State Department. And when I resigned, I was living in Mongolia, and it was 40 below zero when I resigned, and I wanted to get warm. And I thought, well, I've recently lived in Hawaii, so I'm going to try going back there, and I've lived here ever since. I want to first acknowledge that Iolani, who I saw just a moment ago, I want to thank her for organizing the ceremony and protocol that we had last week. And thank you to Orrin, who was there to film it, and several others who were at that ceremony out at Pearl Harbor. The ceremony to remember what Pearl Harbor stands for in the Hawaiian culture, and to be acknowledging the environmental damage that has been done by the U.S. military in these islands for these many, 150, 200 years almost. I'll just briefly go over what's going on as a part of the Rim of the Pacific military exercises that are going on right now. I know our friends from Big Island, one of the great challengers of RIMPAC actually lives on the Big Island. His name is Jim Albertini, and he's been the poster that we had up here just a minute ago that flew away, came out of Big Island through Jim Albertini and some of his friends, Linda Williams. So not only here on Oahu, where most of the 31 countries, 40 ships, 200 aircraft, including, and 5 submarines, including the USS Charlotte, which is the killer submarine that was used in the Indian Ocean, 2,000 miles from Iran. A U.S. Navy submarine blew a torpedo through an Iranian naval ship that was returning from regional military exercises that had been going on that were sponsored by India. The United States did not have any vessels in that exercise, but we did have some surveillance aircraft, and the head of RIMPAC was at that conference, a conference that was held out in India. So we have right now complicit at the U.S. ships that are a part of this RIMPAC, a crew, well thank you, a crew that has recently, so to speak, tasted blood, that they have killed the ship. 83 people that were on that ship drowned or were killed. 23 of them have been recovered. 23 live, and 40 have never been recovered. So it gives you an idea of the lethality and the current use of these military equipment, that they are not just out here just their crew having a time to come to Hawaii. I mean, they are practicing for death and destruction around the world. And what we have here with RIMPAC, which is the 31st time that RIMPAC has occurred in the islands, and it's not the largest, well, it is the largest naval war practice that the United States sponsors, but there are other ones that are going on also. There was another one that just ended out at Guam that had nearly as many vessels, ships from countries as we have here in the Hawaiian Islands. Right now, Guam is receiving another super typhoon. So if you have friends in Guam, try to get in touch with them soon, because they are the second time this year they're having another environmental crisis, a climate crisis with super typhoons. And when we think about the environment and what RIMPAC does to our environment, every year they see a ship that they claim has been cleansed of all of the petroleum products, a ship that has no lethal stuff on it, nothing that will produce that will pollute the waters of Hawaii. But that's just not true. There's just no way that the military can clean all of these parts that go into these huge ships that are being sunk. And they're being sunk in a variety of ways and with a variety of types of munitions that all leave their impact in our waters. Usually they are sunk off the coast of Hawaii in about 6,000 feet of water. So there's a graveyard of all of these ships that have been sunk over the last 31 years that's out off Hawaii. But they use munitions such as land-based missiles. They use the torpedoes that are coming from submarines. They use bombs that are being dropped by Air Force planes. And they're not innocent little pieces of munitions. I mean, they bomb and they sink a big ship. So they are using very dangerous explosives, and those explosives go into our waters. The pollution that happens in Pearl Harbor itself, where you have the concentration, where you have 40 ships from 31 countries that are in that small area. And if you have the opportunity to go out on there, and as a retired military person, I do have an ID card, so I can go out and look. And around every one of the ships, they have the orange buoys and rings, because they know all of those ships are leaking something. So each one of the 40 ships is leaking into Pearl Harbor. And Pearl Harbor, of course, will be flushed out. The waters in Pearl Harbor are flushed out into our ocean. And then depending on which way the currents are going, if you're swimming here on the south shore of Oahu, then you should recognize that you're probably getting some of the oil products of the massive ships that are there. The issue of whether or not we can stop these military exercises I don't know if it's ever been tried in the environmental courts. I mean, I hadn't heard that idea or thought of that idea of trying to challenge RIMPAC in the environmental courts. But I think that would be the place to go because of the known amount of pollution that these ships get. And I'll mention another thing. We now have a new report about what's called the true cost of the U.S. military in Hawaii. It's about a 90-page report that was produced here in Hawaii. It came out under the name of the Institute for Policy Studies out of Washington, D.C., but the majority of people that wrote the chapters of it live here on Oahu. Kyle Kachihiro, who's been working on anti-militarism issues in Hawaii for decades, he's one of the authors. Wayne Tanaka, the head of Sierra Club, is another one of the authors on environmental impacts of the U.S. military here. One of the things that they mention is that the costs, or the state of Hawaii is always very proud that the U.S. military contributes so much to our society, to our economic benefit. In fact, that's one of the things they're talking about right now, about how much money the RIMPAC sailors and airmen are giving into the economy, particularly of Honolulu. Well, when the team that looked at this, that has looked at militaries in various parts of the continental United States and the impact on those communities, they say that the state of Hawaii is overvaluing what the impact here is by almost $2 billion. Almost $2 billion that they are inflating what the positive impact of the U.S. military is here on our economy. So these are the things that we need to look at and use as we talk to our communities about trying to stop the huge amount of military exercises that we have that are here in the Hawaiian Islands, and also to advocate and lobby for the other areas in our region that Guam should not have to be subjected to as many military war practices as they do, that the Northern Marianas should not have to, that Okinawa should not have to, that the mainland of Japan should not have to, that Jeju Island in South Korea should not have to, that South Korea should not have to. So as we think about what we see here as the concentration of one of the largest U.S. military areas really in the world, not just in the United States, and not just in when you consider it as also a part of the continental United States. What we have here on one island in particular, on Oahu, plus you look at the largest military training range in the Pacific, which is Poapaloa on the Big Island. And then you add into it to the Pacific Missile Test Range that's on Kauai. When you look also at the U.S. military observatories and satellite tracking that's on Haleakala on Maui, when you look at one of the very first supercomputers that the U.S. military ever had is on the island of Maui. So, as we all know, there's a huge amount of U.S. military here in the Hawaiian Islands, and when you start delineating it out, it becomes even greater than what one would suspicion. On the issue of land back, of the military, the huge amount of crown lands that were ceded or given to the U.S. government, and then others that were leased to the U.S. government. But now we have, by 2029, the opportunity to get back some 47,000 acres that were leased to the U.S. government for 65 years for $1. And so there are plenty of groups here in the Hawaiian Islands that are working very hard to put political pressure on our state government to say, no, you cannot just say, because of possibility of U.S. military on eminent domain, that we're going to offer up that you can get those lands back for $1 billion or something like that. No, you can't do that. And here in the audience we have people with phenomenal because of lawsuits. Yay for a lot of Maku. But now that they are in discussions with the U.S. Army on potentially the return of the Mahalo Valley to an entity in Hawaii even earlier than 2029. So that's another major victory that we have right now. So I thank you all very much for allowing me as a new person here to the Hawaiian Islands to be able to give a version of what is happening on the military side of it. The cultural and the cultural aspects of this desecration of the lands of Hawaii by the U.S. military certainly has been horrendous. And when you look at Kūkākūkā, you look at Mahalo Valley, you look at all of these places, the horrific things that the U.S. military has done. Most of the people in the military not realizing a thing about the cultural value of these areas to the people whose ancestors were here and the people who live here now. Most of the U.S. military does not give any sort of cultural sensitivity to sending people out to the Hawaiian Islands, whereas at least in some other areas of the world, supposedly, the U.S. military does cultural sensitivity when they go into areas that they're killing people. Like when they went into Afghanistan, the U.S. military were given a cultural guide to what not to do in Afghanistan, but it didn't include killing Afghans. The same thing in Iraq, and you can be guaranteed that there's been no cultural sensitivity at all given to the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and any other U.S. entity that's bombing Iran. No cultural sensitivity at all. And there is definitely no cultural sensitivity given to U.S. military who come and live here, who come here for assignments and are living here within our community. So that's another one of the things that we can rail at our military when we find the opportunity, when there are open houses, which there are, open houses where the military comes to tell our community what good things that they're doing. It's also a wonderful time for 10% of the people that live here in Hawaii are U.S. military veterans. Military veterans. I have my little hat, Veterans for Peace, on right now. And as a veteran from the Vietnam era, I did not go to Vietnam, but that's when I joined the military also during the Vietnam War. Not that I agreed with the war so much, but I grew up in Arkansas. I was trained to be a school teacher. I did not want to be a school teacher, and I wanted to get the hell out of Arkansas. And that's that's how I ended up in the military. So, but we do have, 10% of our population here in the Hawaiian Islands are military veterans. So, talking to them about RIMPAC, talking to them about the cultural desecration, because they are the ones, I think, whose voices, when they find active duty military, the voice of the veterans can get through a little easier sometimes to the people on active duty than others may, just because of the horrific thing going through military training yourself. So I want to thank you all very, very much for your kindness in allowing me to be here.
Can I ask you about Palestine before we start asking questions?
Oh, yes.
Just because I know you have recent experience there.
Yes, thank you very much. And I have been a part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla family for the last 16 years. I have been in Israeli prison twice, in 2010 and 2016, for being on boats that challenged the Israeli illegal naval blockade of Gaza. In 2010, 10 people on our boats were murdered by the Israeli military. 50 people were wounded, and all of us that were on the 6 ships that were a part of that flotilla were beaten up and assaulted. Following 2010, we had 35 boats over the period until 2018 that challenged the Israeli naval blockade of Gaza on behalf of the people. of the Palestinians of Gaza. Starting in 2003, you all recognize the genocide that the Israeli government has conducted on the Palestinians, with over 75,000 people that we know of that have been killed by the Israeli military, and probably hundreds of thousands more that are under the rubble, with the total destruction of virtually every building that's in Israel. In Gaza. The Israelis have also extended their war against Palestinians into the West Bank and are threatening to annex the total amount of the West Bank as they continue village by village by village, kicking the Palestinians out of the villages, similar to what they did in 1948 when over 800,000 Palestinians were pushed out of their homes before the state of Israel was even created by the Israeli militias that came in there, primarily from Europe. In 2025, we were joined, our Gaza Freedom Flotilla Coalition was joined by a new group called the Gaza Samud Flotilla, the GSF. Where they were able to raise so much funds because people from around the world said this genocide has to stop, and if you guys are willing to go in boats and try to physically challenge the Israeli military, we're willing to give you some money to buy some boats. So 42 boats challenged the Israeli military last year, plus 8 of our Gaza flotilla boats, 8 of them, one of which was a big boat with 92 people on board. One of the boats that sailed last year was called the Madeline, and you may remember that because a very important environmentalist, the young Swedish woman named Greta Thunberg, was on her little ship that had only 12 people. And the Israelis humiliated, beat the hell out of her when she was captured by them as they attacked the boats. But that's what got so much attention, that now the flotillas, as we now move in 2026, I've just come back just 2 weeks ago from having been in the Mediterranean for 2 months, as we sailed 77 boats to challenge the Israeli blockade. As you remember, the Israelis were extremely brutal toward the participants, 432 of them that were in the last phase of us and 157 in the first phase. They treated the internationals as they treat Palestinians, and it now gave us, as people who challenge human rights, we now have men and women who have come back to their countries, 60 countries, who are willing to stand up and say, I'll tell you what happens to the Palestinians in great measure, because I can tell you what happened to me in a small measure. And what happened to me was terrible, was humiliating, was assaulting, was violations of everything, and I only got a small treatment considering what they are doing to Palestinian children and men and women. Over 9,000 people are in Israeli prison jails right now. 200 of them are kids, or little kids that are being sexually assaulted by Israeli military and prison guards. It is horrific what they're doing. We will be sailing another part of the 2026 flotilla at the end of the summer. I'll be going back to the Mediterranean. We already have 2 boats that will be coming, one from Scandinavia, one from the UK, and then we'll be joined, and these boats will each have 20 people on them. We will have sailboats that will be joining us in the Mediterranean, and then we will sail again to challenge the Israeli naval blockade and air blockade and land blockade of Gaza and the West Bank. So if any of you all are interested in supporting that, I've got lots of information for you. And thank you very much, and thanks for you're wearing your kufia. I feel naked without mine. I didn't bring it, but thank you for being there. And mahalo, thank you.
Can I ask you a question? The question I have is that, and I'll pass this on to other people that want to ask questions. Right now, the the leases that are going to expire by 29 or 32, those negotiations are happening now, mostly in closed rooms without transparency. All kinds of funny issues going on with the NDAA for 27. There was issues with 26. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that there won't be some sort of lease agreement. You know, whether there won't be a hard stop. They are not going to leave in 29. What a lot of us are hoping for at least is to stop any new damage. You know, as part of the lease package. You know, no more something to have like a Moku model. Can you make an argument from your experience, Colonel, for redistributing training from, say, Kūkākūkā or some of these other places, maybe with the exception of certifications of HIMARS, of infantry, into other areas of Indo-PACOM or USCON, to make an argument for no live fire training?
Yes, well, I think the argument for no live fire training here in the Hawaiian Islands is that tragically, there are lots of places on the continental United States that are available for that. And just as right now, there are troops that are flown and aircraft flown and ships flown or sailed from the continental United States to come here and bomb in Puakaloa and do training off bellows and all that. The military that's assigned here could just as easily, and it's in fewer numbers, can go to the continental United States and do the same thing. And unfortunately, many of the places are on tribal lands of Native Americans. But there are huge training areas that are available in Nevada, in California, in so there are plenty of it. So that's one of the arguments I think that could be made. That you don't have to do the training here. You can do it back in the continental United States and go ahead and say for a cheaper price. I don't know for sure, but go ahead and use that. Let them figure it out. I'm sorry?
The rough numbers, the sloppy math says that the ROI for redistributing that training works with the long-term benefit, fiscally.
Yes.
And logistically.
Yeah, well, and logistically, I mean, they have to move people across from the mainland from the continent to here, because it's not just the 25th Infantry Division up at Schofield Barracks that goes over to Puakaloa. There are other units that come in from all over the continental United States, and that there are land units now from, I think it's 15 countries that are participating in RIMPAC. They've brought their ground forces here that'll be doing amphibious assaults, probably on bellows. They'll be taking them over to Puakaloa. So we could say, use the stuff in the continental United States. I think that's the best argument that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. And other, there's somebody right back here. You want to come up and ask your question so everybody can hear it?
Just off of what you said just now, I had wondered about this. You know, when they bring international forces over to train on these lands, is that in the lease to bring? Is it on the lease to bring international other countries, the forces of other countries, to do live fire training on Hawaiian land?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know if that was ever put in the lease. I mean, that could be a good argument, saying there's never been and we, the people of Hawaii, say unless
do
it's
whatever they want to do, basically.
yeah, but it's a good argument. It's a good argument. Does anybody else know if there is in these leases anything that talks about who can actually do live firing in the Hawaiian Islands?
That language is really old, and I don't think there's any language that would prevent that.
Yeah.
They got pretty wide.
Wide scope, and they widen it up as much as they want to.
It was a good
Good point.
Yeah.
It sure is a good point. Other questions or comments? Mikey, please. And Mikey has just produced a wonderful documentary called Malama Mapua, and big round of applause for that.
Hi, Ann. Sorry I missed your talk, or most of it. So tell me if I am asking something you already addressed, but I keep a lot of tabs ever since 2020, like RIMPAC's social media, and this is the first year since I've been keeping track where they say how many countries participated, which is like 31, but normally in their social media posts, they'll show the list, the entire list of all the countries. And you can only find that on the website now. And I think I know the reason why. I think the reason is because of their war on Iran, the bombing of the elementary school in Minab, and just the tremendous hit the U.S. I think has taken in just its PR since the genocide in Gaza, but also I think with respect to the catastrophic spills in Red Hill. But going back to the proxy war in Ukraine, which you very well versed on, but also the war on Iran, I think has very clearly stretched U.S. military's missile defense capabilities, but also its naval readiness capabilities, just in terms of stock and the types of rare earths that China is no longer trading with them. So do you think that this RIMPAC is possibly going to be potentially scaled down as it's going on right now in terms of the actual assets that they're using? And also, second question is what do you see long term, the long-term impacts of the extended kind of expansion of U.S. empire to its breaking point?
Well, that'll take an hour and a half. But it's a very good point. And speaking of the list of countries that are participating, it is on their website, but as you mentioned, they're not gleefully saying who all these people are on their social media. And they're also not saying that over half of the 31 countries come from NATO countries, NATO members, or NATO partners. So they're bringing Europe into the Pacific to get practice on what? Well, for the U.S. government, it still is, China is our enemy. And they are doing these military war practices because of China. And the armadas that the United States sends through the Taiwan Straits and off the coast, as China says, it's in our front yard. That you have an armada of ships, not only U.S. ships, but now NATO ships that are there in a very dangerous way, because at any moment there could be a mistake that could be made that could trip an escalation in things that are happening out there. When the U.S. flies in aircraft into Taiwan, the PRC does not let that go unnoticed. They send an armada of aircraft right to the air defense zone of Taiwan. So in the same way, they have their own Navy that's out in their front yard saying, this is territory that we have. They do have 9 islands that are very under what do you call it? That Western countries are always harping to China. You've taken these small atolls and you've built military bases on them, and they have brought in an incredible amount of sand onto these atolls that had nothing, and they've created military bases. They have 9 islands like that. How many other military bases do they have in the world? 1, and it's in the Persian Gulf. It's in Djibouti. 9 other countries have military bases in Djibouti. That's the main economic driver of that one little country, is selling off coastal areas. So Korea, Japan, China, the U.S., Britain, France, and there are 2 other countries countries, all have naval bases in this little country of Djibouti. But how many, let's see, how many military bases does the United States have outside of our country? Hundreds, and in the Pacific area, Japan is littered with them, Korea is littered with them. You have Okinawa, now Marines from Okinawa now being transferred into Guam because of citizen outrage about what U.S. military was doing in Okinawa. And as you mentioned, one of the loneliest things can be an activist. I think some of the activists that we've seen that have really stuck out their necks in South Korea and Okinawa and on Guam, and to an extent here in Hawaii, you come in for a lot of abuse on that, and certainly from the point of view as a Hawaiian trying to protect the cultural issues that you have here in the islands. I can understand what you're saying, that it's been very lonely for you, and thank you for bringing it up. Thank you. Thank you all.
I'd like to say one more thing.
Yes, please.
And you spend the last 15 minutes away from Hawaii. But you just say that, why aren't you using the consent decree and the language of the consent decree that PKO used to stop the bombing of Kaua? There was an agreement with the Navy to stop. What was the rationale, the reason for that to happen? Because it already happened.
Yes, you are absolutely correct that the success of getting the bombing stopped in Kūkākūkā is one of the things that the people of Hawaii should be so proud of, and as you say, try to use the methodology that was used during that period to use it now.
So if you concentrate more on Hawaii, I think you'll find that.
Yes.
If we're always adrift someplace else it doesn't apply, you won't find it.
Well, a very good point, and a caution for us all to make sure that we keep using these methods that have proven to be correct. And what you all have done to start off the geothermal drilling on Big Island and using the port system to do that is something that we all have to take to heart and use it.
I was part of Colorado.
Were you?
Not just geothermal.
Oh.
So use the thing that happened. See what the language was and made them to stop. And try to compound on that language. Because it's already documented. It's already been a thing of goals. So you guys got to do more research.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Thank you. See, that's what we need from those who've been through it before. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Perfect timing.
And so I just poured
I almost cleaned out my car last night.
Yeah, Mahalo for that.
The traveling part is a little more difficult than we had initially foreseen at the beginning of the year. The closure of the straits has made jet fuel prices a lot higher. So we want to we have a screen, another screen right now. It's fun, but we have a last but I was looking at the prices, I'm like, that's a good Southwest flight. Oh, they're at those cars? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.